Welcome, everyone, to episode number 1 of Beers in the Lot, a hockey podcast by 4 beer leaguers who play pretty bad hockey, drink beer, and talk about real hockey. Since this is episode number 1, we're probably going to be as good at podcasting as we are at hockey, so terrible. But bear with us, we'll figure it out. We're going to talk about hockey basically the way we talk about it in the parking lot after we play, so expect to hear mostly stuff about the NHL, some tales from coaching and stories from our league and tournaments, and not insignificant amount of everything else. We're going to have a strictly 20-minute podcast because 30 minutes is a pretty good time frame, and you can really fit a lot into 45 minutes. So for the next hour, we're going to talk about the bubble, the state of playoffs, next season, like cap and training and all that stuff, and Nathan MacKinnon, and some other good players too. First, though, some background on us. We're only going to do this the first episode. Next time will be hockey stuff a lot sooner. But none of us are total benders. We get on the board most games, but probably the one who most often affects the scoreboard is going to be Daniel. He probably scored 5 goals last game, and he knows a lot more about hockey than he lets on. Then we got Eric. Then we got Eric. This guy played some college hockey. He coaches, and he knows fancy stats. He can actually tell you what a Fenwick and a Corsi are, but don't ever talk to him about plus minus. Then John has his finger on the pulse of decent hockey. Not just the N, not just the A, but he knows NCAA, he knows the Q and the junior leagues, even knows European leagues. And all 3 of these guys have forgotten more about hockey than I'll probably ever learn. I'm Aaron, and I talk good when I rehearse. I'll be the MC and the sayer of, okay, guys, next topic. So, I know my share of hockey, but next to these guys, I look pretty casual. I'll probably talk about some 6th-round prospect at some point because he ended up on my be a GM mode in NHL 20 on Xbox, but that's about it. So that's enough ado. It's time for some beer, time for some hockey. Let's crack these open.
Oh yeah, first one's always the best. First one's always the best.
So, the bubble. Zip bubble.
Zip bubble.
How do you think these guys are doing? I mean, we just saw Tuukka basically say, I'm out. That's got to be... I guess we got some new information about he had something going on family life. But do you think more guys are going to be dropping out? Like, this is probably going to be a theme, right?
So, I don't know. Like, the Tuukka situation is interesting, right? Because, the Friday before he was complaining that there's no fans and the atmosphere was terrible and he couldn't get into the games. And then, that Saturday he quits, conceivably quits, right? And then we find out, either yesterday or today that, his daughter had a medical emergency and he wanted to leave immediately, which is totally understandable. The good news is the bubble's working, right? Like,
yeah,
NHL teams, right? Like, I don't know, but they've tested 3 or 4 times now, all the staff, all the players, all the coaches. They've had 0 positives. They get to play games. We're well into the first round of whatever we're calling these Stanley Cup Playoffs. So late into the summer in August. So that's the good news, right? I don't know. What do you think, John?
I like the bubble. I like the way it's worked. It's had some pretty good stories. The Tuukka thing is pretty unfortunate. I mean, I know leading up to it, he kind of did some interviews with Nesson Group in the Boston area and even said, during the time I was really spending a lot of time with my kids, all that. So wish him well. Hope his family's all right. I do know the one thing I was thinking about too, him being a goaltender, I haven't noticed any lack of intensity from any of the games. There's been scrums, there's been some blood, in terms of the way these guys are treating the games. They're not they're not treating it like an exhibition. I know the first couple of days when they did do the exhibition round and some of the round robin, we all kind of were like, oh geez, this is a little weird. But clearly it was a more let's get our bodies moving. We don't want to get hurt. And then when the games really started to count, I mean, there was no shortage of issues. I mean, especially last night with the Caps and Isles game, it kind of looked like both teams really woke up. So I definitely say from the players' point of view, it looks like they're totally involved. The goaltender, because you're somewhat separated from it, the crowd noise probably does keep you locked into that mentally a little bit. So that's just my 2 cents. And NHL, we haven't had anyone try to get snuck into the bubble like they have in the NFL and the NBA, and none of the players have left or anything. So I guess it's working. So
no casino trips.
Danny, you like the bubble? What do you like?
Yeah, I think it's working. I think it's kind of like a nice tournament feel to it. Kind of brings them back to when they played when they were younger. I think everything's working. I think the thing with Tuukka was definitely just a one-off type of situation, like a family issue. You know, you can't deny that. I mean, if anything happened to my family, I would definitely be out. So you can't hate him for that. But yeah, I think the bubble's working. I think it's good.
And we're seeing plenty of drip out of these players too. I mean, you're
John's
telling me
about
all
the
the
drip.
stuff you were watching about Toronto, John. Like
lots
the
of
videos
lots
and
of
stuff coming
lots
out.
of
So cool.
Yeah, lots of swag. So some of the teams have had a more lax dress code. So if you kind of look at teams like Chicago, for example, you know, Jonathan Taves, Captain Sirius, whatever you want to call him, he's been showing up in a suit pretty much the entire time. And quite a few of the guys on the Penguins, I know when they were in it, showing up in suits. And then Arizona has these track suits that they're wearing, you know, kind of almost youth hockey like. The kids are showing up to the game in their track suits. And then Toronto apparently had no form of dress code, and the players are wearing whatever. I was following a few of the Instagram accounts, just watching what they were wearing to the games between like the Yeezys and you know, all the other cross body bags, which is essentially a fanny pack, but you know, it's 2020, so you can call it.
God, I hate those things.
But Marner, Matthews, and Nylander, yeah. We're not super old, but those are fanny packs. Like,
Yeah, that's a fanny pack.
Those are fanny packs. We all know.
Fanny packs.
Fanny packs. Someone just picked it up and was like, "Oh, why do I gotta wear it on my waist? Can I wear it?"
You know, you didn't buy that in the men's
Really
department.
Yeah,
Exactly.
They bought it at a gift shop in Florida. That's exactly where they bought it.
How about this? Do you think they even bought it? Do you think that maybe some of these companies gave them this gear to wear because they knew they're in the bubble, the cameras are going to be on them when they're walking to the arena, we're going to get our stuff on national broadcast TV for one of the, you know, major sports that's returning to play? Like, I bet like those guys were getting paid off, if not just getting free stuff, you know?
Well, the one
Chris Versteeg is
wasn't-
on Instagram now, and he made a mention about that, where NHL players, because of the dress code, they are missing out on hundreds, possibly even, you know, into millions, you know, year long, you know, throughout the league, where players could, if you lax the dress code within reason, obviously. You know, we don't need Borat swimsuits showing up to the games or anything, but they, you know, if you lax it, maybe to some extent, they could wear some more designer stuff in terms of hoodies, jerseys, hats, other apparel, all that jazz. You know, that's a good marketing thing for the players. I mean, yeah, just random endorsements. And I'm sure there are some guys that maybe will still do suits, etc. But that the fashion has been an interesting side, because it's one thing you never see out of the NHL.
Right. So we want to talk about the current state of these playoffs and how nobody's still in it that should be, and I wouldn't say nobody, but
that's not true.
There's a lot of underdogs in there.
Yeah, but
they're also losing.
but we're also starting to see like the so-called round robin teams start to emerge, right? They're starting to take those 1 and 2 game leads in the series. They're starting to get to the elimination games now. You know, like the Bostons and the Colorados and these type of teams, right? And Vegas, obviously, winning their series against Chicago. So I think the teams that everybody thought were supposed to do well for the most part are maybe teams like, Washington's an underperformer, just based on historical or recent history, right? Maybe a team like St. Louis, who's expected to be a little bit stronger out of the gate, against Vancouver right now, like they're tied up. So who knows, right? But I don't know. It's good competition, at least. Like John said, I think the guys have really risen to the challenge now that we're actually in like playoff mode. We're in real Stanley Cup playoffs. You're starting to see some of the nasty come out. You're really seeing the competition ramp up.
I think we've seen the teams who, I guess you would say, should be moving on, kind of move on today, right? So we saw Boston moved on, Colorado moved on, Lightning moved on. I guess we're kind of waiting on the Philly Montreal game right now, but they're probably going to pick it up in the third period here. I wouldn't doubt seeing them move on tonight as well. But I think the teams that should be winning in the first, or I guess this is the second round technically, but
what is the playoffs?
Second and first round.
The Corona playoffs, right? Anything can happen.
What is the playoffs?
Yeah. But yeah, they're the teams that should be moving on are actually moving on. So I guess we'll see in the coming days here if that continues the trend there.
Yeah.
The one thing that's been kind of special about it in a way is there's a lot of teams that were on that bubble of they were 10th, 11th, et cetera place. So some of those teams, unfortunately, like Florida, for example, they got knocked out pretty early. Minnesota, you kind of knew what was going to happen with those teams, unfortunately. They get a few games, maybe put up a fight, et cetera. But, Vancouver, they're kind of ahead of the curve of where they should technically be in their rebuild, retool, however you want to call it, after the Dean's retired. Bo Horvat, who's a captain, watching more of his games than I normally would in a regular season, because if it's a West Coast game, ideally, I want to watch Calgary for, the young guys they have, and obviously Edmonton. I want to watch those teams. That's more exciting to me. But watching a lot of the Vancouver stuff with Bo Horvat and Peterson and Besser, those guys were a nice surprise. Montreal, too. I mean, they have some players on that team where going into the playoffs as a Penn fan, I kind of said, it's going to be a tough series because they have Carey Price. But the majority of the team, showed up to play. Carey Price did his job. He stole goals in that series, unfortunately, from the Pens. It is what it is. But Suzuki's had a decent playoff. Max Domi, I would like to see more out of him. It's kind of unfortunate. I don't know what's going on with him. Gallagher's been okay, so, but kind of the found money for some of those teams in the rebuild, kind of finding out what they actually do have versus kind of waiting a full year has been kind of nice too.
Definitely. So, talking about season and waiting a full year, what are they going to do for this next season? Like, we had a couple of arguments over this past week, actually, about whether or not we should implement socialism in the NHL or communism. And so, like, the cap, for instance, the cap's going to be 82.1 or 81.2, whatever it is. And it's kind of coming to light that basically nobody's going to spend the cap because they're not getting the money from tickets and all this other stuff. What do we think about this?
I'm going to let John start because
he knows.
He thinks it's going to really impact stuff. I'm going to have the
He's the cap guy.
I really do think some of your bigger market teams, New York, for example, just the area they're in, the marketing dollars they get, Toronto, Montreal, I do think possibly Edmonton just because of the team they have. And you look at some of the, traditionally it would almost subtract it and go back like years before the salary cap. The teams that didn't operate technically with an old school salary cap, those are the teams that you're going to see spend some dollars. And it's going to, I think for those teams, it's going to be a good way for them to kind of alleviate some of their problems where they can kind of go, okay, we have free agents here, but guess what? Now we can replace those guys with hopefully guys that are going to, step in and fill those roles. I also do think on the flip side too, teams like Toronto, New York, bigger market teams that want to spend to the cap, they're going to help out other teams that, for example, can't spend to the cap this year. I know there was an article in The Athletic about the Penguins. They're going to operate. Technically, it's a rumor, but you don't know. And we'll see what happens because a lot of stuff is still up in the air. They may not operate under that 82. They may slash upwards of $7 million this upcoming year. And they have a lot of free agents / unrestricted free agents on that team, including 2 goaltenders. You have to sign one. So how they're going to use that very, their new roof of the salary cap is going to be interesting too.
And then you throw
teams
Seattle
like Arizona and Florida. Well, yeah, and Seattle's going to be late next year, but also we'll see if they're allowed to be active, middle of the season. Normally the trade deadline before, you're allowed to kind of do some stuff. So we'll see. But I think teams like Arizona, Florida that generally don't spend to the cap or have a different number, that's going to hurt those teams significantly. Big time, I think.
Yeah, but so on the other side of that, I don't think it is going to hurt those smaller market teams just because they're already operating at such a thin margin anyway, right? They don't have the gate. Arizona doesn't have the gate that New York does, or Toronto, or Montreal, or even Edmonton. Even though that's considered a smaller market, it's still a Canadian market with a fairly successful team and some exciting players. So they draw fans and they fill the seats. If we're filling seats next season, we'll see. But I do agree that like the smaller market teams definitely have a disadvantage going into it, like they always do. I don't think it's as great as maybe you think it's going to be. I think where it's going to hurt is it's going to hurt individual free agents because they're not going to have the free agent market available to them if there are teams that are looking to make up revenue by slashing salary cap on their own. Right. Less than whatever the 82 or the 81 million number is. But I don't think it's gonna affect all of those smaller market organizations. I think everybody's pretty much playing by the same rules here. I think they let 24 teams into this qualifier Stanley Cup playoff format, which means there were only really 8 teams that are out of all of the TV revenue sharing. I'm sure they still get some of the money because they're part of the league. So, if you're looking at it from that standpoint, I think everybody's pretty much playing by the same rules and under the same parameters. It'll have an effect on individual free agents, I think. Going back to the goalies, though, like you mentioned, Pittsburgh has 2 free agent goalies. One of them's gone, right? One probably stays, one leaves. Maybe both go. Who knows, right? That the goalie market is going to be flooded with talent. Mm-hmm. You've got both the Pittsburgh goalies. You've got potentially Holtby out of Washington. I don't know what Minnesota's situation is. Like, you got all these guys coming up that could potentially flood the market and even, devalue goalie free agents going into this. So I look at it from that player's perspective. I think that's who's really gonna, if you want to use the word, suffer out of the financial situation that they're coming into next year.
Yeah, definitely. And with
the other thing too with the goalie markets, there are more teams than I can ever recall that where you're kind of like, oh, you got a goalie. Do you really have a goalie? Like Minnesota, we know. Ottawa, no. Edmonton, still up in the air. Calgary, they have Riddick and Talbot. Do you feel really comfortable? Let's see what the playoffs go. Pittsburgh, Washington, obviously. New Jersey, they need a goalie. Something bad. Carolina has Reimer and Mrazek. How comfortable do you really feel after 2 years?
Yeah.
Flaming out. In Dallas, Khudobin's been playing very well, but Ben Bishop is your starter on paper, and he's not playing. So, and the other thing too with the goalies, there's a lot of quality goalies that are not younger that could be on the move too. Like Lundy, he's a little older, but I'm sure he could win some games behind the right team. Devin Dubnyk out of Minnesota. There's talk about Frederik Andersen because they need to just shake it up. I don't know why you would get rid of a goalie who kind of I just
they're just going to overreact. They're just going to
but...
overreact because they didn't do what they thought they were supposed to do.
Well, they had to get
in
rid
the
of
playoffs
because
right, and now that guy is scoring goals and putting up points like crazy in Colorado, and he's a key piece of them dismantling Arizona
and dismantling my chance at $50. Don't worry, I'll pay you, John.
I got it. I got the notification.
You got my PayPal? All right.
I can't wait to buy lotto tickets with that.
My $5. Hey, come on. It's a stupid bet when you lose it, but hey, if I'd won, the bet was what? There's $5 to you if Arizona gets bounced from the playoffs and doesn't win the cup. $50 to me if they win. Come on, that's a fun bet. What if they'd won?
So that was 23 teams for $5, or you're one for 50. Yeah. I like my odds with you picking Arizona. I'll just say that. I really like my odds.
Buy yourself some scratch-offs and turn it into another 10.
Yeah.
It was a good bet for all parties. Aaron knew he was losing $5.
I knew I was going to lose.
And he was okay with that.
Aaron, I think he was totally well aware.
I was very aware.
Kind of where we're on the, I guess, because we're on the topic of really bad bets. Who are some players from the playoffs right now that you're really jazzed to see or not so? Danny, why don't you go first?
Oh, I think everybody agrees with MacKinnon. He's awesome. He's so fun to watch. He's just he's just a beast. His skating is so strong, and he just takes it to the net hard every freaking shift. He's just all over the ice. Who I'm not jazzed to see, I don't know. You might have to come back to me on that one. Can't really think. There's a lot of players that I'm not really jazzed to see.
Yeah, MacKinnon is I don't really want to say it, but he's the best player that's still playing right now. I'll say it.
Without a doubt.
I'll say it that way. That kid is just like you said. He's his skating, he's in baseball they say the 5-tool player, right? He's a 5-tool player. He has everything. The biggest thing for me with him is just how he's able to anticipate plays. He finds the soft areas on the ice that are not being defended, and he gets open, and Rantanen Vatanen, right? Is that the guy in Colorado? Which Finn is on Colorado?
Rantanen.
Rantanen finds him, or Landeskog finds him. It's just, but he finds that he has that sixth sense to know where to go on the ice, when to skate, when to use the speed, and when to maybe delay a bit and sit back and then wait till the space opens and then hit it. He just has that that eye and that mind that I think is amazing. And then he's huge. The guy he's thick, right? He's just
with two C's.
He's just big, too thick with 2 C's, and he could just manhandle people. When what's his name, Krause on Arizona the other night was getting stupid. MacKinnon comes over and was gonna put him in a old pro wrestling DDT move and like break his neck or something. And then he just like shook him around like a dog with a rag toy or something. Like, I mean, that guy is so strong and he's good, smart, strong, everything you want. I love watching him play.
Yeah. Who have you been disappointed by in the playoffs so far?
So, well, until last night, people won't know when this was recorded, I guess, but until last night, Evgeny Kuznetsov on the Caps. I mean, I'm a Caps guy, right? I grew up with them. And, in the 18 season when they win the Cup, like he led the playoffs in scoring, right? And he was a key contributor to that. And then they go into these playoffs and he looked like one of us on the ice, like slow, just making really dumb decisions with the puck, passes into people's feet, passes, way in front of them or way behind them.
You're definitely talking about me at pickup last weekend.
Yeah, when you lined up 3 pucks and I stood still at the other circle
in warm up,
and you passed it 5 feet to my right each time.
Yep.
But that's what he was doing. Like that, you were Kuznetsov. And then, but see, the frustrating thing about that, and the reason why I'm disappointed mostly, is because we know from the past that he can contribute. He comes into this playoffs, needs to be a key contributor with Nicholas Backstrom going down with the concussion in the first game. So that elevates Kuznetsov's minutes, right? He's now the number 1 center on that team. And he's not playing like he's motivated to be that guy, to lead that team in that capacity. Then they're down 3-0 in the series. They're going into game 4 facing elimination. Halfway through the second period, he decides like, oh yeah, I'm going to play now. And he looked like the guy that they had in 2018. So that kind of stuff just drives me nuts to no end. Mostly because I like the team, but also because like
why haven't they been doing it all along?
If it's that easy of a decision at an individual level, why didn't you make it in game 1 or even in game 2 or even in game 3? Like,
what's different from game to game?
Even in the first period of game 4.
And everybody's making a big deal about like, oh, they shave their heads and they cut goatees out of their beards, and Oshie may or may not have a mullet right now, like, and everybody's making a big deal about that, and I understand that, like from playing, like you do, like hockey players are habitual and they're in routines and they have superstitions. We all do, right? Even if they're not completely paranoid and psychotic and stuff. Like you put pads on in a certain order, or you do certain things a certain way, and they all decide like, oh, we're gonna like cut our hair weird and we're gonna cut our facial hair weird. That's not it. Like at some point, like a player, like, and I'm gonna single him out. He decided that in that, like, halfway through that second period, I'm gonna play, and for me, that's a problem. You should show up. Like, game 1, show up. Game 2, show up. Game 3, show up.
In 2 with Kuznetsov. Yeah, in 2 with Kuznetsov, I've never, like, I say this all the time as a Penguins fan, like, Backstrom will go down as probably one of the better playmakers in the league during this era. But because, A, he's very quiet, and B, he's riding shotgun with Ovechkin, no one really talks about him. The guy's going to put up 1,000 points in the next couple of years. No one will really mention anything. And, he has a Stanley Cup trophy to his name. So, I mean, he'll be remembered very fondly. Yeah. Kuznetsov, after that cup run, you kind of were like, oh, man, like, especially as a Pens fan, like, man, Kuznetsov, they got Ovechkin still, they got Backstrom, we're screwed.
Right.
Like, we really need, like, Gino and Sid to kind of, keep going here. But Kuznetsov, at least in the regular season and definitely in playoffs since that cup run, he hasn't shown anything that really leads you to believe, like, oh, man, this guy's going to be a super force. It's kind of like you said. maybe if I have a crazy goatee, I'll play tonight.
Maybe if I look
I
like
also
Walter
think that's
White.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
I think it's
say my name.
well too also like I'm a really big like kind of, and you guys know how I operate. Like I'm not big into like the hype up speeches and stuff. I'm not big
Yeah.
into that because I do think like, especially if you're at a pro level, but even like you get in our men's league, like people are like, oh come on. I think if you're not motivated to skate, you're not going to motivate to skate. Someone yelling at me, like Ray Lewis, like yelling at me, that does actually, if anything, that turns me more off because I'm like, I'm an adult. You shouldn't have to motivate me. I think that's the way, a professional athlete to some extent should be wired. I know that, all the NHL teams do a little goofy stuff and whatnot, but shaving your head and, all that, that's kind of a youth hockey goofball tactic. Like it's just it almost is like they did something to just take away from them for that day. But now that they can't reshave their heads or anything, what's going to happen in Game 5?
Right, because now it's like, oh well,
What
we
do you
did
shave?
we did that and we won. So
Yeah.
now I'm
I'm sure they
take
could shave something.
I'm gonna take the big razor to my head. Oh
Yeah.
my! Like,
I mean, I just one player who I've been really impressed with though is Matt Barzal in that series.
yeah,
He's a threat every single time with his skating, with his playmaking ability, and the other thing too, I've been kind of impressed with. I didn't really realize how tough he is for the most part. Now I'm not saying fighting, but Hathaway kind of went after him last night. Then the Islanders clearly stepped in, but everyone's probably going to give Barzal shit from ducking that hit to some extent. But you looked at the play, Barzal was trying to make a play out of that. He wasn't going to be like, oh, you can hit me and take me off the puck. No,
yeah,
I'm going to try and duck it. And
yeah.
he's really impressed me. Cale Makar too. I won't go too deep into it, but Cale Makar has just looked amazing. Amazing.
I really like that kid. Like because I like college hockey, right? We watch a lot of college hockey and especially Hockey East, and like even when he was at UMass, like it was the same. It was coast to coast plays all the time. It was that first pass, that stretch pass that he can find. He finds those lanes that I don't think a lot of defensemen can find. Coming from their own end out. He skates like the wind. He's got great hands. He can finish around the net. Complete player, just awesome. Hopefully they can protect him though, because Arizona started going after him, right? And that was the whole thing, like with Krause and MacKinnon. Krause, boarded Makar, right? So, and then MacKinnon comes in and acts like an animal. But and Arizona wasn't that physical in that series, so I'm a little concerned about guys like Makar on that team, going against if they see St. Louis, or I don't know, I don't have the brackets in front of me, but if they saw a team like that's
I think Vegas
way
is
bigger,
on their side of the brackets.
Way bigger,
so
way more physical, right? How's that going to affect Makar? Because those type of teams are just going to put the puck behind them and then bang them on the boards, right? Like they're not going to wait for him to get the puck to go hit him. They're going to put him in situations where they can go hit him. So we'll see. I mean, the kid can skate though. Like even if somebody's coming after him, I think they're going to have a hard time catching up to him.
He's a pretty big guy, isn't he?
He is big, yeah. But I don't know if he's played in a series or in a style of game where it's a who breaks down first,
right?
Kind of style of play. We're gonna hit each other until somebody decides that they quit.
Right.
Which is basically what St. Louis did to Boston in the Cup final last year. So I don't know how he would react to that. I don't know how some of their other players would react to that. Like even a Kadri. I mean, he was in Toronto for so long. They didn't make it out of the first round ever while he was there. They still haven't. He actually mentioned that in his post-game interview after the Colorado game today.
Which I'm glad.
It was great.
I'm very glad he's done that.
He was like, I've never been to the second round before.
Well,
so,
he got.
But I don't know how.
Yeah, Kadri unfortunately got it.
You know.
Yeah, Kadri got a lot of nonsense going out of Toronto because he got suspended. But also, part of me wants to say, like, well, if those Toronto, I mean, and granted, we're not in the locker room, so we can't say anything. But you know, some of those guys have a little more backbone, kind of like Kadri, where like, yeah, I may cross the line, but you're not going to get away with that shit. Like, Kadri had that edge. He was really the only player. Zach Hyman, as big as he is, he bumps, but he is not going to be the one that's going to go kind of make you pay in the corner. Kadri will cross the line or not, however you want to say it, but you do.
Yeah,
but
you need those guys.
But my thing is, going into that second round, right? The competition and the tension is a little bit more. The physicality is going to pick up, and they're in that conference. They're going to be facing bigger, more physical teams in style of play. You know, they're going to be. They could potentially be facing St. Louis or Dallas, maybe even Vegas, depending on how things shake out, right? Maybe Calgary makes it through somehow, and then he's got to deal with Tkachuk, right? Like, you know, I don't know. I don't think he's seen that before. I think he's always been kind of the guy that was on the edge and probably was the aggressor for Toronto, like you said. I don't think he's been on the team that is considered a contender and is probably going to go into most of those series, except for Vegas, as a favorite with targets on their backs. Like, I don't know how he would deal with that. I don't think he would be able to. I don't know if he has that experience.
Well, I think kind of too the matchup though. Like, if you look at St. Louis, yeah, they're bigger, but I also do think they're not as fast as the Avs. I think if they play a team like Dallas, I think skating-wise, they can outskate them any day of the week.
Yeah,
and also,
sure.
Dallas has a problem scoring goals, unfortunately. With that roster, they have problems scoring goals, which is crazy to say, but they do. So really, the only matchup kind of in my eyes where it does get a little dicey for the Avs in terms of physicality and skating, it's going to be Vegas.
Yeah.
And the other thing, too, with Vegas, we've seen it so far when they played the Hawks, they have almost changed styles throughout the game.
Yeah.
Which I think if you're a team trying to match up against that, especially like a younger team, kind of like the Avs, I think Jared Bednar does a really good job, but also as a young team, that's a lot of stuff to process in a very short amount of time. And I think, you know, the coaching staff and just the personnel they have on Vegas too, they're very deep. I mean, there's 5 or 6 players when the playoffs started. I kind of was like, oh my gosh, they have Stastny still? Like, I forgot about him completely. And Pacioretty only played a few of the games in the Blackhawks series.
Yeah.
So now he has his sea legs there. So, I mean, that could be a tough series. And, you know, Vegas has both goaltenders going, that's a little scary.
Yeah.
I mean, if one falters, the other one's right there.
Yeah.
That's a good thing for Vegas to have.
Yeah.
Both are competitive, but.
Well, I have them on both of my brackets. They win the cup, so
it's gonna happen. You heard it here.
So.
It's gonna happen.
Hey, John, I'll bet you $5 that Vegas wins.
Are you betting that you can get me to bet again?
I bet you $1 I can get you to bet. $1.
Dollar
Kick
bet.
it there, Steve ass.
All right, guys. Well, I think we should go ahead and call it here for now. So thanks everybody for listening. And